Hello, everyone. I'm JD John, part of the digital and app innovation business at Microsoft Asia team. I work with customers across Asia Pacific in their cloud native journey. Today, what we will do is we'll take you through on a journey of how to get your enterprise grade applications on Azure Redhat OpenShift, which is one of the newest container offerings from Microsoft. So let's get started. And we'll move to the slide. What we'll do today is there is a 4 point agenda. First, I will cover a bit about the partnership between Red Hat and Microsoft, which is what culminated in a whole host of offerings from the Red Hat stable as a managed offering on Azure. The second part, we will look at why look at ARO in the first place, right? What makes you look at ARO as an option for your Kubernetes containerization journey? The third part, we will also delve into the key benefits that ARO provides, both technical and business. And the last part, we will leave it for a quick Q&A. Like they say, it all starts with a vision. Microsoft's transition to adoption of open source dates back to 2015. That is when we started offering RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, on Azure. To quote Microsoft CEO Satya, we are a developer tools company first and now, and of course, we are all in on open source. That says a lot. Now, a bit of a recap. Microsoft and Red Hat partnership goes back to 2015, like I said. So the strength of this partnership has been built on our foundation to work uh, and jointly support Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And the learning and growth that we acquired over the period helped us to create the unique customer value that our enterprises together strive to deliver. So we got a host of solutions that currently are offered on our platform, starting with the Red Hat Enterprise Linux on Azure. There is the Microsoft SQL Server on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. There is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux for SAP solutions on Azure, and the ARO, Azure Redhat OpenShift, that we will cover in detail. And one of the newest offerings is the JBoss Enterprise application on Azure App Service, which is a fairly new product as well. Okay, what I would like to do over here is take a pause to understand what is your top priority. Are you, as an enterprise, looking to bring innovation to market faster? Or is it to create a flexible model in order to adapt to changing needs of your business and your changing landscape? Or do you want to create new experience for your customers and your line of businesses? Or is it something else, right? So I think most of the discussions that we have with customers typically falls into one of these three buckets. What I would also like to do is go to the next phase of this on understanding what is holding us back on reaching these objectives. Now, the underlying challenge for a variety of organizations could be largely bracketed into one of these three categories. The first one is a limited time and resource. We often hear customers say, I don't have time to focus on new applications. I'm too busy keeping the lights on. We're here to fix this for our customers. We give our customers the focus to spend their energy on the products that their customers need and not running platforms. Switching gears a bit to budget, for many organizations, rising cost and hidden cost as well are hindering their movement forward. And because of this, many customers are actively moving to a subscription based model to save costs, pay for only what they use, and scale easily. The other challenge is typically around legacy architecture. While legacy is a reality, right? That's what got us where we are today. But it needs to be transformed for us to move ahead and meet our future goals. So legacy architecture could be an issue for many organizations to acquire and merge with other companies, or changing the way they do business currently. And the other challenge we see is about the complex integrations and implementations that already have. So going in hand with the legacy architecture is a need to integrate and continuously manage tools from various vendors. So while implementing the core tool itself is seen as a relatively straightforward, integrating with various tools, applications, and platforms in use, and managing it over a period of time can be a quite an uphill task. Now, let's think about how organizations solve this. So one of the areas that we see a lot of focus is about adopting Kubernetes, looking at cloud native architecture. Now, this is something that is not devoid of its own set of challenges. Now, as I said, Kubernetes has caught the application world by storm. Installing and playing around with Kubernetes for many is not a big issue. But establishing Kubernetes as a platform for enterprise to run business critical applications takes a lot more. It's easy to download and install Kubernetes, but there are a number of things that needs to be pieced together for it to be tested and hardened for operations. For example, take identity management. With Kubernetes, you can provide access to critical internal systems for employees, partners, and customers. You need to adhere to the security rules established in your company. The way to do this is to write an integration between Kubernetes and your company's LDAP. This requires knowledge of DEX, an open source identity that Kubernetes uses, and integration to LDAP. Similarly, from a monitoring standpoint, you will need to hook to Prometheus for open source monitoring and alerting until we can get a full visibility into the operations and what's happening within the clusters. So all of this leads to certain amount of complexity and things that many organizations do it for the first time. Now, a survey that was carried out across organizations, 75% of the enterprise users identify that the complexity of implementation and operation emerges as the key challenge for adoption of Kubernetes. I'm referring to the upstream Kubernetes that is part of the CNCF Foundation, right? So this is where a lot of offshoots and further evolved versions of Kubernetes comes into picture. Now, one of that is from the Red Hat camp. So Kubernetes has caught the application world by storm. Installing and playing with Kubernetes is not hard, but it is far different compared to establishing Kubernetes as a platform for the enterprise and run it for business critical applications. While it is not hard to download and install Kubernetes, getting it to production ready, running business critical applications, that takes a lot more of effort. For example, just take identity management as one scenario. With Kubernetes, you will need to provide access to critical internal systems to employees, partners, and customers. You would need to adhere to the security rules established in the company. So the way most organizations would do is they would write an integration between Kubernetes and your company's approved LDAP. This would require knowledge of DEX, the open source identity system that Kubernetes comes with, and integration to the LDAP system. Similarly, for monitoring and alerting, they would need to hook up with a Prometheus application, and you would need to get full visibility into the Kubernetes operations in testing and production. So to sum it up, the challenge that many organizations go through is, to identify the complexity of implementation and the operations. This emerges to be a key blocker, and that was to a large extent, a showstopper to wider acceptance as well. This is where a lot of the downstream Kubernetes version that came into place, so that they make life a lot easier, the likes of the Red Hat OpenShift for that matter. So just to put things in perspective, what OpenShift does compared to what we showed earlier is it addresses a lot of these challenges that we hear from customers around the container security, compliance, day-to-day operations, and the application development management. So if the question that we normally ask yourself is about, where are you in your container journey? What technologies are you looking at currently? And what do you consider critical to the selection process in terms of both product and vendor capabilities? Here are some thoughts that we kind of see customers looking to address, right? OpenShift is a platform which takes container security very seriously, and it provides a holistic approach to deliver what we call a trusted Kubernetes platform. It also recognizes that keeping up with the frequent upstream releases of the Kubernetes platform can be challenging. And that is where they have invested in automated capabilities like the operator framework and over-the-air updates. So it makes it easier to keep up to date with the latest innovations that comes out and deploy containers at scale. Finally, it's all about developers. So it also comes with a fair amount of investments in automation capabilities in OpenShift, the CI/CD pipelines, A/B testing. There are developer tools like the code-ready workspaces. There's a cloud-native framework for the likes of Spring, serverless, Windows containers. And no matter what applications you're building, the chances are that the OpenShift platform can significantly improve developer productivity, right? So that's what makes this to be a core offering. Now let's look at how organizations typically run OpenShift containers on a self-managed model. This is the most common thing, right? You go to Red Hat, have a license for OpenShift, you would procure a bunch of hardware, or you could run it on, let's say, a virtual machine on the likes of Azure. Now, when we look at the scenarios, the platform support is what is provided by the vendor, which in this case will be the cloud platform providing the VM and Red Hat for the OpenShift containers. The customer needs to take care of the software security and updates, network configuration, monitoring, logging, cluster creation, all of that. This tends to take away a fair bit of developer and operations team's productivity. Imagine having 4 different environments at least, right? Dev, UAT, prod, and DR, the minimal you can think about, and having to update patches and security updates into these versions just to keep up with the the life cycle of what the container platform wants it to be, which is at least a new version every 4 to 6 months, right? So you get an idea of the complexity that we are talking about. This is where a platform like Azure Redhat OpenShift comes into picture. This is jointly engineered and supported by Microsoft and Red Hat with a integrated support experience. Some of the key highlights of the platform: one is it provides a much faster time to value. You can actually have a cluster up and running in less than 32 minutes. And we have demonstrated examples of this leading to 90% improvement in developer productivity. And along with this, we have a simplified deployment process with proactive management from the expert SRE team, the site reliability engineering team, which significantly aids to the predictability from a platform management standpoint. The other key highlight is about the reduction in complexity. We can have the fully managed clusters on a pay-as-you-go model without having any upfront commitments. This provides an industry-leading 99.95% availability. And lastly, it goes without saying on the security and compliance part of it, it comes with a host of compliance on various industry standards like PCI DSS, HITRUST, FedRAMP, SOC 2, and HIPAA, and a variety of lists which I'll share in the list towards the end of it. Now let's look at how OpenShift as a fully managed service compares with the self-managed example I was showing in one of the earlier slides. Azure Redhat OpenShift provides organizations to focus on building applications that provide business value and lets Microsoft and Red Hat take care of everything else. So when I say everything else, it means cluster creation, cluster management, monitoring and logging, network configuration, software and security updates. So basically, in effect, this lets the developers and the operational stakeholders in the organizations to focus on building features and functionalities that adds value for them. Let's look at this a bit more deeper from a business value standpoint. We often see organizations deploying 3 times faster than they did previously. We have customer examples where the time to market went down from 6 to 8 months to somewhere close to about 10 weeks. The other benefit was significant reduction in the operational cost. Typically, organizations don't take into account the cost to acquire and manage the tools that they need to fully run Kubernetes. I mean, these are tools like monitoring, logging, metrics, pipeline, and more. And this doesn't even touch the resources needed to support Kubernetes. So when we factor all of this into a managed platform, which is doing all of this under the hood from a platform standpoint, the benefits accrue to somewhere close to about a 60% reduction in the overall operational cost. The other key aspect a lot of organizations fail to take into consideration is the developer wait time. Imagine a developer for an application needs to provision a new environment. They would need to raise a ticket for the infrastructure provisioning. The ticket goes to a ticketing machine. There's a backlog for people to kind of attend to that. And then whenever the time comes, they fiddle about manually for creating a new VM. The whole process could take anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks, depending on how large the organization is. Whereas over here, the developer who wants to have a new microservices up and running, he could just execute an ARO, ACRO create script with the right declaratives, and the entire script execution with the new cluster creation can be up and running in less than 35 minutes, 32 minutes. That's the amount of productivity that this comes in, right? And as per Forrester, the DevOps process provides, having a significant DevOps process provides at least a 20% lift in the operational efficiency as well. So all in all, this makes a strong case for looking at a managed platform like OpenShift. Okay, so now let's skip to the part of how do we get started on ARO. So like I mentioned, ARO is a first-party service on Azure. You can have that started from the Azure portal or using an Azure CLI. Most customers use and command AZARO create. You can create a fully managed ARO cluster in minutes. There are multiple commercial options that we provide, ranging from a zero commitment pay-as-you-go model where billing is done by the hour, to a reserved instance for 1 to 3 years, which provides you significant cost and benefits for upfront commitments. Now, to the folks who are familiar with the Red Hat OpenShift experience, you are in for no surprise. It's a familiar development environment as you've been using with the OpenShift. There is the OC command. You can bring in the tools that you're already familiar with. That provides a significant advantage in terms of not having to spend time to unlearn and relearn just because it is a platform offering that gives you managed benefits. Continuing with the familiarity theme, what we can use the OpenShift Developer Console, which is a streamlined console which offers a simplified view of the Kubernetes concept. You can actually import source from Git, view and manage the application configuration and workload and deploy applications. So all in all, we have ensured that the experience for an existing OpenShift developer who comes onto ARO is consistent and holistic. Right? Now, moving to the Azure specific parts, what we also can do is to have the cluster scale, auto scaling, scaling up the cluster nodes. This becomes as simple as flicking a switch. We can easily add or remove compute nodes to match resource demand using command lines like the AZ OpenShift scale. Now let's look at some of the scenarios that many of our customers are working with. We have customers connecting their existing on-premise OpenShift applications to ARO, hosted on Azure cloud. This is done for a variety of reasons, ranging from scaling existing applications, creating a resilient hybrid architecture to have a cloud-based DR for mission-critical applications. We use Azure Express Connect to establish connectivity between the customer data center and Azure regions. And one more thing that kind of goes a bit more deeper towards this aspect is for some of the stringent zero trust requirement, we create private cluster management and ingress endpoints. We can configure control plane API and ingress to use private endpoints. This, along with the egress lockdown, helps to create complete isolation or total isolation that a zero trust enterprise would want it. Now let's look at how ARO manages it under the hood to provide the 99.95% availability that I spoke about, which comes by default. So we to ensure the highest resiliency, the cluster components are deployed across 3 Azure regions or availability zones in the support Azure regions. This comes by default, which is what kind of helps us to provide that 99.95% availability across. Now let's look at the native experience for the existing Azure customers. So being a first-party Azure service, ARO natively connects with all the Azure services, be it having to create cloud security with Azure Firewall, or using the Microsoft Defender for image scan to identify vulnerabilities, or using the Azure Active Directory for authentication, and load balancing for ingress traffic management. All this works seamlessly as compared to running an OpenShift on VM, because, like I said, this is a native offering as a first party service on Azure. Now, this brings us to an interesting question. With all the value that ARO provides, uh, how much does it cost for my enterprise to adopt it, right? Is it a multiple of what I would do a OpenShift self-managed on my data center as compared to, let's say, buying an ARO as a platform as a service? So here is where we have an interesting insight. We did a Forrester Total Economic Impact survey for one of our large customers. This is actually a global customer with about 20,000 employees and close to $10 billion of revenue. They had about 20 concurrent OpenShift projects that they were running across the organization, across geographies, and the results were pretty startling and surprising in a positive way. So they could get a 468% ROI over a 3-year period, uh, as compared to using OpenShift self-managed on their data center or VMs, right? So that's a significant value, and they could recoup the investments on ARO, the payback time as we call it, in 6 months. So to sum it up, we get on one hand significant business value in terms of 70% improvement in developer velocity, 50% improvement in operational efficiency, 20% time saved on the time that developers use for maintenance. And on the other side, we get significant business value in terms of much faster ROI and payback time. So this is a best of both worlds. Now, how do we get started? How do we go from here? So here's where we have a couple of interesting resources for you. So what you could do is go to the first part, which is the aroworkshop.io. This is a 2-hour self-paced hands-on workshop for you. You can actually create a cluster, understand how to install the operator, how to scale the cluster, how to upgrade the cluster. So there is a bunch of video resources that we have put in this link. This is something that you can go through at your own pace and help you understand what is the knowledge that you require and the skills that you need to acquire before you can create your own first project on ARO. Really hope you start working on it right away. That brings us to the end of the session. Thanks, folks. Thanks for taking time to be with us. I hope you really start working on your first OpenShift deployment right away. The resources are for you in the last screen. Thank you. Thanks once again.